The title of today's sermon is Let There Be Light, and I invite you to hear these words from the book of Psalms, Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and foes, they shall stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise up against me, yet I will be confident. One thing I asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, and to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent, and he will set me high on a rock. Now my head is lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. Come, my heart says, seek his face. Your face, Lord, do I seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger, you who have been my help. Do not cast me off. Do not forsake me, O God of my salvation. If my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will take me up. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Do not give me up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and they are breathing out violence. But I believe that I shall see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage, and wait for the Lord. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Well, I remember my first church that I served all on my own, Unity United Methodist Church. It was a wonderful church that was out in the country down in South Georgia. And way out there in the country was the church, and then beside it you had the parsonage, and then on the other side of the parsonage you had the church cemetery. That was not a problem during the day, but at night, it was a little spooky. Driving up to a dark church and a dark house and shine those lights out into the cemetery. And I prayed many a prayer at night. Lord, I better not see anything moving over there in that cemetery. One night, one of my old college roommates was over at the house. We were watching a movie. It was pretty late at night when all of a sudden the power went out. And there I am in the middle of the country, and it is just pitch black dark out there. And my buddy Todd and I went outside to go check it out, and our eyes made our way nervously to the cemetery over there. And then that sorry joker said this. He said, well, I'll see you later. And he got in his car, and he drove back to his house, leaving me out there to fend for myself versus the zombies and the ghouls and whatever was going to come from that cemetery over there. Well, obviously I survived because I'm so brave. That's why I made it. Actually, I went and hid in my house until the power came back on. It came on like 10 minutes later, but it felt like it was an hour out there in the dark. But I was glad to see it. I was glad to see that light come back on. Have you ever been in deep darkness before? Maybe you were afraid of the dark as a kid, and mom and dad better have that night light ready to go when they turn the lights out. Maybe you've been camping, and you've heard some strange noises outside the tent, and you're eager for the sun to come up the next day. Maybe you've been up here at the church at night, and there's all kind of creaks and cracks, and you're like, who was that? What's going on? Who's in here with me? Or maybe it's not been literal darkness. Worse yet, maybe there's been some situation in your life where you've just felt like you were in the dark. Symbolic darkness. You feel like you're alone. You can't see the way forward. You don't know where to go or where to turn. I think we've all been there before, at least I know I have. Now, one of the many wonderful things about the Bible is that we have this book called the Psalms. The Psalms are songs and prayers to God that express a wide range of emotions, and the Psalms cover everything that you could possibly feel, and then they turn it into prayer. And did you know that we can do that with our own lives too? Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, we can take all of that and send it back to God as a prayer. I mean, that's what God wants us to do, because that's how we maintain a living relationship with Him. Here in Psalm 27, the psalmist King David, he knows darkness. He knows the trials of life. He knows problems. But he also knows something more. He knows trust. He knows that he is not alone in that darkness. And so he says this, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. The Lord is the stronghold of my life." It seems that David had enemies. He had people who were against him and were out to get him. And maybe you felt like that before in your own life. Have you ever felt like the world was just kind of pushing in on you and you were just being surrounded? It's like being in darkness. But David knows deep down in his soul that the Lord is his light and salvation. And what that means for us today is that we are never really alone in this life. We are never walking through this world by ourselves. And David reminds us here that we have a God who is ever present. A God who is active and involved, a God who is there with us and beside us. And because of that, guess what? What do we have to be afraid of? Absolutely nothing. Who do we have to be afraid of? Absolutely no one. And that is great news for all of us here today. This means that we don't have to be crippled by fear when life throws us curveballs. And life does throw us curveballs, doesn't it? Job loss, sickness, divorce, a friend turns their back, getting older, loneliness, depression, the loss of a parent, the loss of a loved one, the loss of social standing. What about things like fear? Fear of humiliation, fear of disappointing others, fear of failure, or what about this one? Fear of the unknown. Maybe I'm the only one who deals with fear of the unknown. I can come up with 1,000 things that are going to go wrong tomorrow, and I think that every one of those things are going to happen. But what David is saying here is that we don't have to fear any of those things, not because they're not scary, and not because they won't happen to us. A lot of them will happen to us. A lot of them have already happened to us. But we don't have to live in fear because we know that we're not alone. Because God is our light and our salvation. Our bottom line this morning goes like this: don't fear what the world throws at you. Rejoice in what God gives to you. And what does God give to us? His presence. Very simply and very plainly, God gives us himself. You see, we were made for God. We were created to live for God. And our lives make sense only when we're living in that relationship. The bad news is that we've done a pretty bad job of that in the past. That's called sin, and all of us are guilty of it. We've all turned aside from God's purposes and God's ways for our lives. But the good news is that God doesn't allow our past mistakes to ruin his future purposes. Did you catch that? God does not allow our past mistakes to ruin his future purposes. So, God gives us himself. God gives us relationship. He welcomes sinners like us into his family. And David is so enthralled by this good news that he says in verse 4 here that he has one desire, one ask, to live in the house of the Lord, to behold the beauty of the Lord in his temple. Back in ancient Israel, you had the tabernacle, then you had the temple, and these were both seen as the dwelling place of God, the place where God's presence and beauty were there in the world. And David says, I want to be there. I want to be in God's presence as much as I can. I want to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. I want to drink in God's glory. I want to be all in on the presence of God. Wow, that's pretty awesome, isn't it? Now, I've got to be honest, that does not always reflect my thought life when it comes to God. Sure, I want God to help me out every now and then. I want God to get me out of a jam when I make a mistake. I want God to pitch in and send some blessings my way. But I'm not totally consumed with being in God's presence and God's glory. I'm not completely enthralled by the beauty and the love of the Lord that I just want to be in his presence all the time. But shouldn't I be? Shouldn't we be? The answer is yes, we should. Yes, because God has willingly chosen to reveal himself to us. God has chosen to give us his presence, to give us himself. And nothing in this whole wide world is more important than that. David says, I don't want anything else. One thing I ask, one thing I seek after in this life. I just want to savor and enjoy the presence of God. And because that was David's mindset, he could live out this marvelous trust in the Lord. Well, I wonder how differently my life would look if I began to change my mentality to be more like this. If I began to change my whole mindset into one that said, I want to be all about God. I want to be all about the Lord's presence. I want to spend time with him. I want to bask in his glory because he is so good, so wonderful, so true, so loving, so almighty, because he's just better than anything else this world has to offer. Don't you think our lives would start to look a little different if we lived like that too? Don't you think people would start to see some kind of a change in us? If you think back to your Old Testament, you'll remember in Exodus when Moses goes up on the mountain to spend time with God, and when he comes back down, his face is literally glowing because he's been in the presence of the Lord. Is your life radiant like that? Are you glowing because you've just been spending so much time with God? Is there a light that is shining forth from you when you head out into the world and to your week? Or are you living in fear? One summer day, a farmer was sitting out front of his shack. He was smoking a pipe when a stranger came by and asked him this question. He said, "Friend, how's your cotton coming along?" And the farmer answered, "I ain't got none." The stranger asked him to elaborate on this. And the farmer said, "I didn't plant none because I was afraid of the boll weevil." And the visitor said, "Well, okay, well, how's your corn doing?" The visitor said, "Well, I didn't plant any corn. I was afraid of the drought this year." The visitor continued on with this line of questioning to the farmer. He said, "Well, how about your potatoes?" And the reply was similar. He said, "I ain't got none. I was scared of the tater bugs." The stranger finally asked, "Well, what in the world did you plant?" And the farmer said this. He said, "I didn't plant nothing. I just decided I would play it safe this year." I'm afraid many of us are going through life like that, right? We're just trying to play it safe. Are you living in fear? Are you trying to play it safe? Or are you allowing God's light to shine in you? Allowing God's light to shine through you? Well, Jack, how in the world can we do that? That sounds good to me. First of all, you have to want it. You have to make a choice. You have to come to a place in your life where you freely and fully surrender yourself to God and say, "God, I want to truly be alive for you. I want you to save me from the darkness, and then I want you to shine your light in me and shine your light through me." You have to want it. Do you want it? And once you come to that point, you have to keep on making that same decision day after day. I want to seek after God. I want to be in God's presence. David says that something in his heart was reminding him to seek after God. I believe that was God's prevenient grace. Something deep down inside of him was saying, don't stop seeking God. Don't think that you've arrived. Don't quit trying to become the person that God wants you to be. I think a lot of the time we get off track and then we quit. We get off track and then we tend to give up. Life throws something our way. We get out of the habit. Somebody leads us astray. And the next thing we know, we've wandered off the path and we give up. I love the movie Dumb and Dumber. Always makes me laugh. These two well-meaning guys, Harry and Lloyd, they're not very bright. They're making a cross-country road trip, and they're driving. One night they're driving. Lloyd comes to the highway, and he makes a wrong turn, and he drives 5 hours in the wrong direction. And Harry wakes up in flat middle America and declares this. He says, I kind of expected the Rocky Mountains to be a little rockier than this. Well, we get off track sometimes, don't we? But instead of staying there, instead of giving up, David reminds us to seek the Lord. Seek His face. And do you know what the really cool thing is? You can seek the face of God at any point in your life. No matter where you're at right now, no matter what you've done in your past, no matter how old you are, no matter how young you are, seek the face of God. Seek the presence of God. Because get this, He wants to be with you. He wants to have that living relationship with you. He wants you to return back to Him. David continues to pray, "Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path." Did you know that being on the level path, being on the right path, is not just a one-time thing that we do? It's not just something we do in the past. It's something that we have to continue to do day after day after day. David is seeking to stay on the right path, even though he's already a believer in God. And that reminds us that there's always more for us to learn. There's always more areas for us to grow in. There's always room for improvement. So teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path. I'm going to encourage you today, never grow tired of asking God to teach you, asking God to help you to grow in whatever area that you need to grow in. You don't have to raise your hand at this, but maybe you need to grow in the area of patience. Maybe it's help loving somebody that's kind of difficult to love. Maybe it's laying aside greed. Maybe it's putting your pride aside. Maybe you have anger issues and it's hurting those around you. Maybe you need to be more bold in sharing your faith with other people. Ask God. Seek God. Cry out to God. God, teach me your way. Lead me in your path because mine's not working out very well. Finally, David closes out the psalm like this. He says, I believe that I shall see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. David believes. David is confident. He has all the confidence in the world in God. And notice what he doesn't say here. David does not say that he's confident that God will keep him from all harm. David doesn't say that he's confident that nothing bad will ever happen to him. David doesn't say that he's confident that he will never walk through darkness. Instead, David says, I believe that I will see the goodness of God in the land of the living. David is confident in the goodness of the Lord. David is confident that God will never leave him alone. David is confident that God will never let him go. Do you have that kind of confidence in the Lord today? Do you have that kind of assurance in God? Well, it comes from the fruit of a living relationship with Him. And so, church, I want to invite you today to turn your life over to God fully this morning. I invite you to fully give Him your heart. Give God your past. Give God your present. Give God your future. Give over control of your life, your hopes and your dreams and whatever you're looking forward to, and let God turn it into something even better. I don't know if you are living in darkness right now. Maybe you're caught up in sin. Sin is real. Maybe you're in danger from sin. Maybe you're living in the darkness of life's circumstances. That's also real. What I do know is that you do not have to remain in that darkness. Why? Because we worship the living God. Because we worship the God who in the beginning spoke the world into being and said, let there be light. And guess what? There was light. Because we worship the living Christ who said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Allow God to shine His light into your life this morning. Allow Jesus to be the one who lights up your world. You won't regret it. Wait for the Lord. Be strong. Take courage. He will set us high upon a rock, and He will be our light in this life and in the next. Thanks be to God. Let's pray. Almighty God, we thank you for being our light and our salvation. And that even though we walk through difficult times, even though we go through hard situations, we don't have anything to fear because we know that we're not alone. We know that we don't walk by ourselves. We have you with us. We have you living inside of us. And we ask you to change our hearts, transform our lives so that we can be the people that you're calling us to be. And as you shine your light in us, help us to shine that light out into the world so that others may be drawn to you through us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.